Good evening, traveller. Before we set sail into the cold seas of history, take a moment to get comfortable. Wrap yourself in a blanket, pour a warm drink, and let the noise of the world fall away. Tonight, we journey together into the age of the Vikings, into a world of storms and sagas, of harsh winters and burning halls, of men and women who lived with one foot in myth and the other in struggle. If you wish to see more stories told like this, please support the voyage with a like and a subscription. It truly helps. And one more thing, leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and at what time. Perhaps midnight in New York, morning in London, or dusk in Tokyo. Together, across the world, we sit by the same fire of history. Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. Birth of the Viking world. Imagine standing on the edge of a fjord in the far north, 1,000 years ago. The air is sharp, tasting of salt and pine, and the wind carries the cries of gulls that wheel above the black water. Behind you, mountains rise like jagged teeth, their peaks crowned with snow even in summer. Before you stretches the restless sea, cold and infinite, a mirror of the sky. This was the cradle of the Vikings, a land both breathtaking and merciless, a place that offered beauty, but rarely mercy. Scandinavia of the Viking Age, roughly from the late 8th century to the 11th, was not the lush farmland of France, nor the fertile valleys of the Nile. It was a land of extremes. Winters were long and cruel, with nights that seemed to stretch endlessly, broken only by the flickering dance of the northern lights. Summers were brief and fragile, but in those short months, the sun barely dipped below the horizon, granting long hours to harvest what food the earth would yield. Life here was a negotiation with nature. The soil was thin, stony, and reluctant. Fields had to be coaxed into giving barley and rye, hardy crops that could survive the chill. Cattle, sheep, and goats were precious, not only for food, but for hides, wool, and bone. Every family was both farmer and herder, every child quickly learning that survival depended on labor, foresight, and luck. A bad harvest could mean hunger. A harsh winter could mean death. Yet it was precisely this unforgiving environment that carved the resilience of the Norse people. To live here was to be hardened from birth. Children grew up with chores from the moment they could walk, tending animals, fetching water, gathering firewood. Women kept the household alive through weaving, preserving food, and managing the farm when men went to sea. Men labored in fields, hunted in forests, and, when necessity called, took to the waves in search of what the land could not provide. But hardship was not the only teacher. This landscape inspired imagination. The mountains, seas, and forests became alive in stories and myths. Thunder was not mere weather. It was the hammer of Thor, striking against giants in the sky. The whisper of trees and rivers were believed to carry spirits, hidden powers dwelling in every corner of the natural world. To live in Scandinavia was to live in constant dialogue with forces greater than oneself. Villages were small, clusters of longhouses built of timber and turf, their roofs low against the wind. Smoke curled from hearths, carrying the smell of peat fires and stews of fish or barley. These were not grand cities, but tight-knit communities, bound by kinship and necessity. A man's reputation mattered here as much as his strength, for in a small village everyone remembered. Honor and shame lingered like smoke. They could cling to a family for generations. The sea was both a barrier and a lifeline. Fjords cut deep into the land, and waterways stitched villages together more effectively than rough forest paths. Boats were not luxuries, they were necessities. To fish, to trade, to visit neighbors, even to survive the winter. One needed to master the water. The ocean could be cruel, swallowing men and ships without warning. Yet it also whispered of distant shores, of lands richer and softer than the north. Isolation shaped the Viking psyche. Imagine knowing that beyond the mountains and the sea were empires, Byzantium with its gold mosaics, the Abbasid Caliphate with its silks and spices. Yet in your homeland, life was a battle against frost and stone. How could one not feel the pull of the horizon? Curiosity, desperation, and ambition were woven together. It is no wonder that the Norse grew restless. Hunger might spark it, but pride and wonder fueled it. In a world where survival itself was uncertain, the boldest turned outward, chasing opportunity wherever the sea could take them. And so, the Viking was born, not as a mythical figure with horned helmet and endless thirst for blood, but as a product of his land. A man or woman who had endured the cold bite of wind, who had wrestled life from thin soil, who had learned to read the moods of sky and water. A people who believed that their fate was already spun by unseen hands, yet who refused to wait for death to find them. The Viking Age did not begin with a single raid or a single ship. It began here, in the valleys and fjords, in the long winters that demanded resilience, in the short summers that demanded speed. It was born of necessity and sharpened by imagination. Before a single sword struck a monastery door, the North had already created its warriors. To be a Viking was to be a child of this land, half farmer, half sailor, half dreamer, half survivor. Their saga begins not with conquest, but with survival. Chapter 2. Home and Hearth. Step inside a Viking longhouse, and you step into a world that hums with life, warmth, and quiet tension. The first thing you notice is the smell. Smoke from the central hearth curls in lazy spirals toward the roof's vent, mingling with the earthy scent of straw on the floor, the sharp tang of preserved fish, and the lingering musk of animals pressed into stalls along one wall. The longhouse is both a shelter and a stage where every sound, the creak of timbers, the shuffle of bare feet, the crackle of fire, carries weight, meaning, and story. Here, life is immediate, intimate, and relentlessly communal. At the heart of the house, the fire burns steadily. Its light flickers across timber walls, illuminating carved chests, woven rugs, and tools hung carefully above the hearth. It is a warmth that reaches not only the body, but the spirit, a small defiance against the harsh winds and icy fjords outside. Around this fire, life unfolds in rhythms honed by necessity. Men, women, and children are part of a single organism, each performing roles that sustain the household and, in turn, the village. The longhouse is a place of work, play, learning, and ritual, all fused into one continuous experience. Women bear the heaviest burdens of domestic life. Their hands are never idle. They churn butter in wooden paddles, spin wool into thread, weave cloth dyed with alder or lichens, mend clothing, and prepare food for the family. They tend the youngest children, care for the elderly, and supervise older children in their chores. Their work is often invisible to outsiders, yet it is the quiet engine that keeps life moving in the harsh north. Without them, the household would crumble. Men, meanwhile, split their time between the home and the wider world. They till stony fields, tend livestock, hunt deer and wildfowl, and fish the icy rivers. They construct tools, repair boats, and sometimes leave for trade or raiding expeditions. Their labor is physically demanding, dangerous, and relentless, but it is complemented by the work of women and older children, creating a network of interdependence. A man's strength, skill, and reputation are all crucial, but they only matter because the household functions as a whole. Children are introduced to work almost as soon as they can walk, yet play is woven into their lives. A child carries water from a nearby stream, gathers kindling, or feeds chickens, but they also pretend swords with sticks, chase shadows across the walls, or sled down frozen slopes in winter. Learning and play are inseparable. In the long, dark winter months, when the fjord is frozen and snow presses against the walls, children huddle near the hearth, listening to the sagas recited by elders. These stories are not entertainment alone. They are lessons in courage, cunning, loyalty, and survival. A tale of Thor facing a frost giant or Odin testing mortals becomes a mirror for the child's own future challenges. Food is scarce, precious, and deeply ritualized. Stews of barley, root vegetables, salted or smoked fish, and preserved meats bubble in iron pots above the fire. Techniques like smoking, salting, fermenting, and drying are not merely culinary. They are survival arts, passed down through generations. Bread is baked rarely and carefully. Every loaf is a testament to months of labor in the fields. Even the simplest meal carries the weight of toil, the anticipation of hunger's return, and the quiet relief of sustenance secured against the cold. Seasonal rhythms dominate every aspect of life. Spring brings planting, pruning, and repair. Summer offers the fleeting bounty of growth and harvest. Autumn demands hurried preservation. Winter forces endurance and reflection. Each season comes with its own tasks, festivals, and challenges. The return of the sun after the long darkness of winter is celebrated. Children are named in ceremonies, and harvest feasts mark the culmination of months of toil. These rituals reinforce community, gratitude, and resilience. The longhouse is alive with sensory details. The flicker of firelight casts moving shadows, sometimes illuminating carved idols of gods, sometimes the faces of family members caught mid-task or mid-laugh. The soundscape is rich. The low murmur of conversation, the clatter of tools, the scratching of animals in their stalls, the crackle of peat on the hearth. Occasionally, the wind rattles the roof, carrying the cries of gulls from the nearby fjord, or a sudden crack in a frozen branch announces winter's hidden dangers outside. Every day is a delicate balance between comfort and risk, warmth and cold, sustenance and hunger. Religious belief permeates domestic life. Gods and spirits are not distant abstractions. They live in objects, spaces, and actions. Offerings may be placed on the hearth or near doorways, a token of gratitude or a plea for protection. Ancestors' spirits are honored, their presence imagined in the flicker of candlelight or in the arrangement of tools and belongings. Fate is not simply a philosophical idea. It is felt in every gust of wind, every failed crop, every moment of survival. The longhouse embodies this spirituality. Its hearth, walls, and roof frame both the material and the invisible world. In the longhouse, intimacy is constant. Families sleep together in alcoves lined with straw and furs, with little privacy and no separation between generations. Life is observed, judged, and shared. A child's laughter resonates as much as an elder's cough. A minor quarrel carries weight because everyone remembers. Honor, reputation, and the preservation of family dignity are lived here in small gestures. A gift of food to a neighbor, a careful repair of clothing, the patient teaching of skills to the young. These actions, seemingly mundane, are the threads that weave the fabric of Viking society. And yet, even within the confines of the longhouse, the world beyond calls. The fjord, the forest, and the distant hills are constant reminders that survival is not guaranteed. The sea, in particular, looms as both lifeline and threat. Boats must be built, maintained and mastered. Fishing, trading or raiding all depend on skill, courage and timing. The hearth teaches patience and endurance. The sea teaches ambition, daring and adaptability. To be a Viking is to inhabit both spaces simultaneously, the safe, intimate home and the unpredictable, infinite world outside. The Longhouse, then, is more than a building. It is a crucible of culture, emotion and survival. Its walls contain not only bodies, but values, stories, rituals and knowledge. It teaches patience, cooperation and resilience. It shapes children into adults capable of meeting the harshness of the world outside. And yet, it cannot contain the Viking spirit entirely, for the lure of the horizon, the mysteries of distant lands, and the challenge of survival beyond the familiar fjord stir curiosity, ambition and courage. In every glance toward the distant waters, every shared meal, every whispered saga by the fire, the Viking Longhouse binds the past and the present, the mundane and the heroic. It is a place where life is lived fully, dangerously and intimately, where every person's actions resonate across generations, and where the seeds of exploration, ambition and survival are planted deep in the hearts of those who will one day leave the safety of home for the unknown. To understand a Viking, one must understand this place, the warmth and smoke, the labor and laughter, the rituals and stories, the constant tension between comfort and survival, and the pull of the horizon. It is here, in the Longhouse, that the Viking spirit is nurtured, tempered, and set free to shape the world. Chapter 3: Tools, Craft, and Trade. The clang of hammer on iron resonates through the early morning mist, echoing off the timbered walls of a Viking settlement. Sparks leap like fleeting stars, dancing briefly before disappearing into the air, leaving behind the scent of molten metal and the heavy tang of labor. This is the world of the craftsman, where survival and ambition converge, and where every tool forged carries the potential to sustain life, defend it, or extend it across distant seas. To walk among Viking workshops is to witness the alchemy of necessity, skill, and creativity, a process as elemental as fire, water, and stone. In a corner of the Longhouse, a blacksmith pounds iron into shape, his muscles coiled with effort, eyes narrowed against the glare of the furnace. Each strike is precise, deliberate, born of years of apprenticeship and the unforgiving demand of survival. A poorly forged axe could mean a failed hunt, a lost battle, or the collapse of a roof. Tools are not mere implements. They are extensions of the human body, instruments of power and resilience. From chisels for carving wood to sickles for harvesting grain, every object is a product of intimate knowledge, refined through trial and error, and marked with the imprint of its maker's hands. Wood is another language of the Viking world. Carpenters bend, shape, and join timber with an eye for both function and beauty. A boat, for instance, is more than a vessel. It is a bridge between communities, a ticket to distant lands, and sometimes an instrument of conquest. The long, graceful lines of a longship reflect not only the need for speed and stability, but also the aesthetic sensibilities of a people attuned to their environment. Each plank, carefully carved and fastened with iron rivets, carries the sweat of many hands, the wisdom of generations, and the silent blessing of gods invoked to protect those who sail upon it. Yet craftsmanship is not the exclusive domain of men. Women engage in textile production with equal skill and importance. They spin wool into thread, dye it with natural pigments, and weave intricate patterns into cloth. Their work is both practical and symbolic. Embroidery may tell stories of ancestors, honor gods, or mark rites of passage. Garments serve to protect against wind and cold, but they also signify social standing, family identity, and even regional origin. A well-dressed woman or child is not merely warm. They carry the visible imprint of care, skill, and attention to tradition. Trade pulses like a hidden river beneath the surface of Viking life. Markets hum with the exchange of goods, ideas, and stories. Furs, amber, iron, and woven textiles are bartered for grains, salt, silver, or exotic spices carried from distant shores. These interactions extend beyond economics. They weave a network of relationships, alliances, and influence that stretches across Scandinavia and into the rivers of Eastern Europe, the coasts of Britain, and even the Mediterranean. Every coin, bead, or carved token is a story of movement, connection, and ambition, a silent testament to the Vikings' reach and ingenuity. Skill is not limited to metal or wood. Leather workers shape hides into shoes, belts, and bags, tanning with tannin-rich bark and stretching with meticulous care. Potters shape clay into vessels that will hold water, mead, or food through long winters. Carvers etch intricate designs into everything from combs to ceremonial shields. Each object is functional, yes, but also a canvas for expression, a whisper of identity, a marker of the human desire to leave a trace upon the world. Even the simplest spoon, carved from a branch, bears the signature of a life lived in intimate communion with natural materials. Every craft is entwined with ritual and belief. Before shaping iron, the blacksmith may invoke Thor or seek the favor of a protective spirit. Textile patterns may encode symbolic meanings, calling upon fertility, protection, or courage. The creation of objects is thus inseparable from the cultural and spiritual fabric of Viking society. To forge, weave, or carve is to engage not only with material reality, but with invisible forces, unseen yet deeply felt. Craft becomes a dialogue with the world, a negotiation between human intention, natural law, and divine will. Apprenticeships begin early. A child may watch their parent carve a wooden comb, noting how each stroke aligns with the grain, how pressure shapes form without breaking it. Later, they will imitate, fail, and eventually succeed, absorbing the rhythm and precision through repetition and attention. By adolescence, they may assist in constructing a roof, preparing hides, or spinning thread for winter garments. Knowledge is not written in books. It is inscribed in hands, muscles, and memory. The mastery of craft is mastery over survival itself. Trade is not merely local. Longboats carry goods across fjords, rivers, and oceans, linking settlements and fostering networks that can change a community's fortune. A sack of amber from the Baltic might end up in an Irish monastery. Furs from Norway find their way to Frankish courts. Traders navigate storms, rival clans, and uncertain politics. Each successful exchange strengthens a household, while every failed journey can lead to ruin. Trade demands courage, skill, and negotiation, qualities that are mirrored in every other aspect of Viking life. Yet, despite the focus on tools and trade, beauty is never absent. Ironwork may bear intricate knot patterns. Carved wooden panels may depict wolves, dragons, or mythological scenes. Even everyday objects carry aesthetic intention. Vikings were practical, yes, but they were also storytellers, embedding narratives and symbols into the fabric of daily life. A well-made tool, a carefully carved chest, or a finely woven cloth is a testament to the intertwining of utility and art, survival, and identity. Workshops are social spaces as much as production zones. Craftsmen exchange knowledge, gossip, and news, often over meals shared amid the clatter of hammers and the warmth of fire. Children may hover, observing, asking questions, learning the rhythms of labor as well as the moral codes embedded in craft. Patience, honesty, respect for materials, and pride in one's work. Here, the skills of life are transmitted alongside stories, lessons, and communal memory. The sensory world of craft is vivid. The sting of smoke, the heat of iron, the scent of damp wool, the texture of clay, the sound of chisels biting into wood. These impressions define a life lived in close contact with the physical world. Time is measured by the progress of a blade, the drying of clay, the setting of a joint. Success is tangible. Failure leaves scars or wasted materials, immediate reminders of the stakes involved. To create is to assert agency over a sometimes indifferent world, to shape matter in accordance with human need and imagination. Even the smallest actions carry consequences. A poorly stitched cloak may expose its wearer to frostbite. A cracked boat plank may turn a voyage into disaster. Every object is a nexus of risk and care, skill and fate. Craft, therefore, is inseparable from survival, ambition, and the ethical dimensions of responsibility. The hands that shape wood or iron are hands that must protect, provide, and endure. The horizon beyond the workshop always calls. Tools made here may journey far, carried by sailors to distant lands, traded in foreign markets, or used in raids across hostile shores. Each creation becomes part of a larger story of movement, conflict, and connection. The Viking craftsman is, in this sense, also a silent traveller, extending influence and identity far beyond the longhouse. In understanding Viking life, we must not see crafts and trade as mere background activities. They are central to survival, social structure, and cultural expression. They reveal how a society confronted scarcity, uncertainty, and danger, how it balanced practicality with beauty, and how it transmitted knowledge across generations. Every iron rivet, carved figure, woven cloth, and traded amber bead is a testament to human ingenuity, adaptation, and aspiration. Craft, trade, and skill are the veins through which the lifeblood of Viking society flows. They connect households to villages, villages to regions, and regions to the wider world. They reflect the values of resilience, dexterity, foresight, and honor. In every workshop, market, and harbor, the Viking world is both tangible and symbolic, immediate and far-reaching, rooted in daily labor, yet expansive in its implications. To witness a Viking workshop is to witness the intimate interplay between human agency and the world's raw material. It is to feel the pulse of a society that survives by shaping, trading, and innovating. It is to recognize that every simple object carries stories, risks, and connections that stretch across time and space. The clang of hammer, the hiss of steam from wet clay, the soft rustle of wool. These are the sounds of continuity, endurance, and aspiration. And as dusk falls and the workshops grow quiet, the tools and goods stand as silent witnesses. They mark the passage of days, the accumulation of skill, and the networks of exchange that sustain life. The Viking world is a tapestry woven from labor, craft, and connection, and every stitch, rivet, and plank tells a story of human perseverance, ingenuity, and the desire to leave a mark upon the world. Chapter 4. The Sea and the Ships. The sea was both cradle and crucible for the Vikings. Its endless expanse stretched beyond sight, a mirror of the sky by day and a black abyss by night. Mist would curl around jagged cliffs like fingers, hiding rocks and reefs that could tear a longship to splinters. To the untrained, it was a threat, a vast, unknowable void. To the Viking, it was home, battlefield, and highway all at once. The salt spray on skin, the relentless rocking of the deck, and the roar of the wind were not mere discomforts. They were the rhythm of life itself. Vikings did not merely traverse seas, they conquered them with craft and cunning. The longship, slender and elongated, was an instrument of mastery. Its shallow draft allowed it to slip silently into rivers, glide over hidden sandbars, and beach directly onto shores without warning. Carved with care, reinforced with iron rivets and overlapped planks, the ship was as much a statement of art as it was a vehicle of war. Dragons, serpents, and knotwork adorned the prow and stern, symbols meant to intimidate foes and honor the gods. The very shape of the longship whispered power, sleek, lethal, ready to strike. Life aboard these ships was intimate, harsh, and communal. Rows of oarsmen sat shoulder to shoulder, pulling in perfect unison as the vessel slid through water like a blade. The work was exhausting, demanding, and unrelenting. Sleep came in snatches, often curled on hard wooden planks, with only a sail overhead and the open sky above. The smell of tar, salt, and sweat mixed with the occasional tang of cooking fires. Food was sparse, often dried fish, hard bread, and salted meat, but each morsel carried sustenance for journeys that could last weeks or months. Navigation was a craft both practical and mystical. Vikings had no magnetic compasses, no charts as precise as modern maps. Instead, they read the sky, the stars, the movement of the sun, and the patterns of birds. Knowledge of currents, tides, and wind patterns was passed down through generations. Some accounts hint at the use of sunstones, crystals capable of polarizing light, to locate the sun on cloudy days, a technique that bordered on the magical. To sail without such understanding was to court death. The ocean could claim the careless, but mastery over it brought freedom, opportunity, and conquest. Storms were tests of endurance and skill. A sudden squall could twist the ship, splintering oars, tearing sails, and flinging men into icy waters. Thunder rumbled like the war drums of the gods, and lightning illuminated the deck in stark flashes, revealing terrified, resolute faces. In such moments, fear and resolve coexisted. A seasoned captain called commands with calm authority, oarsmen obeyed with synchronized precision, and the vessel, a fragile bridge between survival and oblivion, moved as one living entity. Beyond survival, the sea was a stage for adventure and commerce. Trading expeditions reached as far as Constantinople, where the shimmering walls of the city reflected wealth, diplomacy, and exotic goods. In these waters, the longship's duality was evident. Simultaneously, a trader's vessel and a warrior's weapon. Raiding, diplomacy, and trade were intertwined, each voyage a negotiation with fate, wind, and circumstance. The Vikings' reputation as both merchants and marauders preceded them, ensuring that wherever they landed, they commanded attention and respect. The social aspect of life at sea was intense. Space was cramped, privacy non-existent. Bonds between crew members were forged in shared hardship, mutual trust, and the constant presence of danger. Arguments could escalate quickly, but so too could loyalty and camaraderie. Stories were told, songs sung, and the sagas of previous raids recounted to inspire courage. Humor often broke tension, and superstitions guided behavior. Certain omens, bird flight, cloud formations, or the restless wind could dictate whether a voyage continued or retreated. Life on a longship was a blend of discipline, ritual, and instinct. Shipbuilding itself was a meticulous art. Keels were carefully shaped from oak, the strongest wood available. Planks were overlapped in a technique called clinker building, which allowed flexibility in rough seas. Each curve, rivet, and joint was deliberate, ensuring speed, durability, and maneuverability. Craftsmanship was passed from master to apprentice, with knowledge accumulated over generations. A poorly built ship was not merely inconvenient, it was a death sentence when faced with storms, hostile shores, or sudden attacks. Every longship was a testament to skill, patience, and understanding of the natural world. Longships were also symbols of power and status. Chiefs commissioned elaborate vessels to showcase wealth, influence, and divine favor. These ships were not just functional, they were ceremonial. A decorated prow might depict a dragon or serpent, eyes wide and teeth bared, a warning to foes and a statement of authority. Boarding such a ship was entering a microcosm of society, the captain's authority absolute, the crew loyal, and the vessel itself an extension of personal and familial prestige. Raiding from the sea required precision. Timing was crucial. Attacks were often conducted at dawn or dusk to maximize surprise. Knowledge of tides, currents, and the seasonal rhythm of villages allowed Vikings to strike with efficiency. Those who resisted faced the combined terror of fire, sword, and psychological warfare. Vikings understood that the sea was not only a highway, it was a shield and a sword. They moved with stealth, speed, and lethal intent, transforming rivers and coastlines into theaters of sudden conflict. Yet the sea was also a place of reflection, solitude, and awe. Under calm skies, the horizon stretched endlessly, waves catching sunlight in a glittering dance. Silence between oar strokes allowed thoughts to wander, of home, family, gods, and destiny. Journeys could be months long, and the isolation forged mental resilience. Some sailors wrote of visions, dreams, and omens seen only at sea, the vastness of water blending reality with imagination. For Vikings, the ocean was both adversary and companion, testing the body while nourishing the spirit. Survival depended on understanding nature's subtle signs. A sudden swell could indicate a hidden reef. Changes in wind direction signaled approaching storms. Observing birds, fish, and clouds informed navigation, while interpreting subtle patterns in water currents dictated route and timing. Experience was paramount. One misjudged wave, one ignored omen, and a crew could be lost to icy depths. Yet those who mastered these signs moved with confidence and grace, turning the sea from a chaotic force into a navigable path of possibility. The ocean also dictated culture and imagination. Songs, myths, and sagas were shaped by the rhythm of waves and the loneliness of long voyages. The sea was home to monsters and spirits, divine and malevolent, a mirror for the Vikings' understanding of fate and fortune. Stories of leviathans, sea serpents, and enchanted islands reflected both fear and reverence. Life aboard a longship was entwined with myth. The tangible and supernatural were never separate, but always overlapping. Viking seafaring influenced politics, commerce, and exploration. Control of rivers and coastal routes enabled raids, trade, and the expansion of influence far beyond Scandinavia. Settlements were connected by water, and distant lands, England, Ireland, Russia, even North America, became reachable through ingenuity and persistence. Each journey was a bridge between worlds, blending discovery, exploitation, and cultural exchange. The ocean was a conduit, and the Vikings were both masters and travelers on its endless stage. To step aboard a Viking longship was to enter a world of contradiction, harsh yet exhilarating, communal yet isolating. dangerous yet empowering. Every voyage demanded courage, skill, and adaptability. The sea shaped identity, forged resilience, and inspired awe. Its mastery defined the Viking way of life, linking survival, conquest, and culture in a symphony of wind, wood, and water. In the roar of the waves, the creak of timbers, and the chorus of oars, one could hear the heartbeat of an entire people, fierce, inventive, and unyielding. The longship, the crew, and the sea were inseparable. Together, they formed a dynamic force capable of war, trade, and exploration. Vikings understood that dominance required more than strength. It required knowledge, observation, and respect for the unpredictable power of water. Their legacy, etched in sagas and ship remnants, endures as a testament to human ingenuity, courage, and the relentless desire to explore the unknown. Chapter 5. Warrior and Honor. In the heart of a Viking village, honor was a currency more valuable than gold. The clang of axe against shield, the gleam of iron under a cold northern sun, and the disciplined march of warriors were not merely displays of power. They were declarations of identity. To be a Viking was to live with the weight of expectation, courage in battle, loyalty to kin, and a reputation that would outlast death itself. Each man's worth was measured in deeds, in the stories told of his valor, and in the fear or respect he inspired among allies and enemies alike. Weapons were extensions of the warrior's body and spirit. Axes were the most common, their blades honed to a deadly edge. Some were simple tools, designed for both labor and combat, while others were crafted with care, adorned with intricate carvings and inlays that spoke of lineage, gods, and destiny. Swords, rarer and more treasured, were symbols of status and skill. Forged by expert smiths, balanced with precision, and engraved with runes, a sword was more than a weapon. It was a companion, a talisman, a judge of courage. Spears, often dual-purpose for throwing or thrusting, were equally revered, their sharp tips finding gaps in armor, and their reach a deadly advantage in formation. Shields, round and often painted with striking patterns, were both protection and psychological tool, a canvas for intimidation, and a statement of personal identity. Training began early. Boys learned to wield weapons with precision and discipline, mimicking the movements of seasoned fighters. Strength, agility, and stamina were essential, but so too were strategy and observation. A battle was not only a contest of force, but of wit, timing, and understanding one's opponent. Warriors studied the art of feints, formations, and terrain, knowing that a single misstep could mean death. Drills were rigorous, often conducted in the biting wind or under the sweltering sun, forging bodies as resilient as the steel they wielded. Combat was a theater of both terror and ritual. The clash of swords, the cries of the fallen, and the rhythmic pounding of shields created a symphony of chaos. Yet even within this violence, there was order. Warriors respected signals, formations, and the leadership of experienced chieftains. Honor dictated behavior. Cowardice was despised, betrayal unforgivable, and reckless bravery both admired and feared. Each fight was an opportunity to etch one's name into memory, to secure a reputation that would ripple through generations. Reputation was inseparable from action. Tales of valor, cunning, and loyalty were recounted in halls and around fires. A single heroic act, holding a bridge against overwhelming odds, striking down a notorious foe, or rescuing a comrade, could define a man's legacy. Conversely, failure or dishonor could shadow a life, stripping a warrior of respect and, sometimes, of community. Honor was not merely abstract. It was survival, social currency, and spiritual significance, intertwined with beliefs in the gods and fate. Viking combat was brutal, immediate, and intimate, unlike modern warfare, where distance and technology create separation. Viking battles demanded proximity, courage, and adaptability. The heat of the clash, the smell of blood, and the thunder of boots on churned earth created an environment where instincts guided action. Eyes constantly scanned for openings, ears caught subtle changes in enemy rhythm, and bodies moved as extensions of weapons. Every swing, parry, and step mattered. Death was ever present, a shadow that sharpened senses and heightened awareness. Beyond individual skill, the social structure of warrior bands shaped effectiveness. Loyalty to a leader, trust in comrades, and understanding of collective strategy were vital. Raids were carefully planned, utilizing surprise, terrain, and knowledge of settlements. Discipline within the chaos of attack ensured that fear did not unravel the force. Every man's contribution mattered. Hesitation or insubordination could doom an entire raid. This interdependence fostered bonds that were unbreakable, a brotherhood tempered by fire and steel. Weapons also held symbolic power. A sword passed from father to son carried not only iron, but the weight of family honor. Axes decorated with runes invoked divine favor and protection. Shields painted with dragons or serpents were intended to terrify the enemy and embolden the bearer. These tools were tangible manifestations of belief, courage, and identity. Their maintenance was meticulous. Rust, dull edges, or cracks were signs of neglect, tantamount to a blemish on the warrior's soul. Ritual was intertwined with martial life. Before battle, warriors might drink mead, swear oaths, and call upon gods for strength. They sought omens in fire, stars, and birds, interpreting signs as guidance or warnings. Death in battle was not merely an end, it was a passage to glory. Those who fell valiantly were promised Valhalla, a hall of endless feasts and combat under the gaze of Odin. This belief transformed fear into purpose, framing mortality as an opportunity to achieve eternal honor rather than a mere cessation of life. Violence was a language of reputation. Tales of raids, duels, and heroic exploits spread quickly, reinforcing social hierarchies and personal identity. Bards, schools, and storytellers ensured that deeds, both spectacular and tragic, echoed far beyond the battlefield. A warrior's life was thus lived in the interplay between action and memory. Glory was earned, remembered, and retold, transcending mortality through narrative. The ethics of battle were paradoxical. Vikings were fierce raiders, yet they adhered to codes of respect and fairness among equals. Betrayal within the group was condemned. Cowardice invited scorn. Mercy might be extended to those who surrendered, sometimes in strategic calculation, rather than sentiment. Honor required balance, assertiveness without recklessness, courage tempered by intelligence, and loyalty without blind obedience. A truly respected warrior combined ferocity with wisdom, understanding that reputation was as fragile as the edge of a finely honed blade. Combat was not confined to war. It permeated daily life. Feuds, duels, and minor skirmishes were arenas to prove skill and maintain standing. The ability to defend oneself, one's family, and one's property was as crucial as the capacity to raid distant shores. Weapons were everyday companions, their presence a constant reminder that life was precarious and honor demanded vigilance. Even in peace, a Viking's readiness for conflict defined identity, social bonds, and survival. Women too were entwined with the concept of honor. Shield maidens, though rare, demonstrated that valor was not exclusively masculine. Women maintained households, defended homes, and ensured the continuity of kinship, their actions judged by similar standards of loyalty, courage, and wisdom. Honor extended beyond the battlefield. It permeated family, trade, and community. Every act contributed to reputation. Every choice echoed in memory. Training, ritual, and combat shaped the Viking psyche. Warriors were attuned to fear, courage, and anticipation. Each battle was a test of mind as well as body. Observation, patience, and intuition were as vital as strength. Experience honed reflexes. Storytelling preserved lessons. Through cycles of preparation, conflict, and reflection, Vikings cultivated a culture where honor was inseparable from identity, and survival depended on both skill and reputation. Even the act of dying carried significance. A warrior who fell in battle could be celebrated for generations, his name sung in halls and chronicled in sagas. Death from disease or old age, however, lacked the same resonance. Vikings sought meaning in confrontation with mortality, understanding that only through courage, skill, and loyalty could life achieve a measure of permanence in memory. In this way, the battlefield was both crucible and canvas, shaping lives and legends alike. Weapons, tactics, and honor also reinforced social hierarchies. Chiefs, jarls, and kings relied on warriors to maintain influence, enforce law, and project power. Loyalty to a leader was reinforced by respect for martial skill and ethical conduct. Raids and battles were opportunities to elevate status, consolidate resources, and secure alliances. A warrior's actions had ripple effects across the community, intertwining individual honor with collective destiny. Reputation influenced commerce, politics, and diplomacy. Raiders were both feared and respected. Traders and emissaries, enforcers and negotiators. Acts of courage could open doors. Acts of cowardice could close them forever. Honor was thus both personal and strategic, shaping interactions far beyond the battlefield. The Viking way intertwined physical prowess with social intelligence, recognizing that survival depended on understanding human dynamics as much as mastering weapons. Ultimately, the Viking warrior was defined not merely by strength, but by courage, skill, and the pursuit of lasting renown. Honor was earned in sweat, blood, and measured risk, preserved in stories and song. Every swing of an axe, every thrust of a spear, every strategic choice carried significance. Life was transient, but deeds could endure. In the roar of battle, in the silent preparation before a raid, in the shared laughter and counsel of comrades, the essence of Viking identity was revealed, a relentless pursuit of respect, courage, and a name that would echo through the ages. Chapter 6. Faith and Myth. Imagine a longhouse at dusk, smoke curling from the hearth, shadows dancing along the timbered walls. The air is thick with the scent of burning pine, and the low murmur of conversation is punctuated by the occasional laugh or sigh. Outside, the wind whistles through the fjords, carrying with it the whispers of ancient beliefs, tales older than the stones beneath the village. Here, in this liminal space between hearth and wild, the Viking mind grappled with gods, fate, and the mysteries of existence. Faith was not a distant abstraction. It was woven into every gesture, every decision, every glance toward the uncertain horizon. The pantheon of Norse gods was vast, tumultuous, and strikingly human. Odin, the All-Father, was a god of wisdom, war, and death. He hung upon Yggdrasil, the world tree, sacrificing an eye for knowledge, demonstrating that insight came at a price. Thor, with his hammer Mjolnir, embodied raw strength and protection, defending gods and mortals from the chaotic giants that lurked beyond order. Freya, goddess of love, fertility and war, moved between passion and strategy, her presence a reminder of the intertwining of desire and destiny. Loki, the trickster, embodied change, chaos and cunning, forces both feared and revered. These deities were not distant abstractions but intimate presences, guiding, challenging and judging human action. Faith was experienced through ritual and practice as much as through stories. Offerings were made at groves, stones, or in home shrines. Livestock, food, and finely wrought objects could be dedicated to the gods in hopes of protection or favor. The act of sacrifice was not merely transactional. It was a dialogue with forces beyond human comprehension. Each gift, each prayer, was imbued with intention, and each response, through signs, omens, or of events, was interpreted with care. The sacred was not confined to temples, but infused the world, from the crashing waves to the whispering forests. Rituals were communal, binding society through shared reverence. Seasonal festivals marked the passage of time, celebrating fertility, harvest, and the cyclical nature of life and death. Yule, celebrated in the depth of winter, was a time for feasting, storytelling, and offerings, a moment when the community reached outward to the unseen, seeking favor and balance. Blots, sacrificial rites, could honor gods, ancestors, or spirits of place, blending fear, hope, and reverence into acts that strengthened both spiritual and social cohesion. Fate, or word, was a pervasive concept. Vikings understood life as a tapestry woven with threads beyond mortal control. Every birth, death, and decision was part of a greater pattern, one that even the gods respected and sometimes manipulated. Courage in the face of inevitable destiny was a virtue. Foresight, gained through omens and divination, was a tool to navigate the unknown. Fortune might favor the bold, but wisdom required recognition of limits. To live well was to embrace uncertainty with honor, to act decisively while acknowledging the currents of fate that carried all lives toward their inevitable end. Stories, or sagas, were the vessels of faith and myth, the living textbooks of belief. Tales of gods, heroes, and monstrous beings were recounted around fires, in halls, and at sea. These narratives shaped moral understanding, provided guidance for action, and preserved the memory of deeds, both exemplary and cautionary. A young warrior might hear of Sigurd slaying the dragon Fafnir, learning lessons of bravery, greed, and cunning. A farmer might recount the journeys of gods to explain storms, fertility, or disease. Myth was not entertainment alone. It was moral compass, cultural archive, and spiritual lens. Omens and divination guided daily life. Seers, or vulvas, interpreted runes, dreams, and signs in nature. Birds, the fall of a branch, or a sudden gust of wind could carry messages from the unseen. These interpretations inform decisions, whether to raid, marry, travel, or build. Faith was pragmatic as well as mystical. It directed action as much as it comforted the soul. Life was uncertain, but guidance existed if one listened carefully to the subtle murmurs of the world. Death was understood through the lens of belief. Mortal life was temporary, but courage, honor, and devotion could secure an enduring legacy. Those who died bravely in battle were promised Valhalla, where they would feast and fight until the end of the world. Others might go to Folkvanga, Freya's hall, where the chosen lived among warriors and the honored dead. The fate of ordinary deaths, through age, sickness, or accident, was less certain, but ancestors, spirits, and the continued memory of one's deeds provided continuity. The afterlife was both reward and reflection, a mirror of earthly virtue and failure. The natural world was suffused with spirits and significance. Mountains, rivers, forests, and oceans were alive with power, inhabited by beings both benign and malevolent. Giants, elves, dwarves, and spirits were part of a cosmology that demanded respect and caution. To ignore these forces was to invite misfortune. To acknowledge them was to live harmoniously within a cosmos that was at once dangerous and magnificent. Humans, in this worldview, were neither masters nor victims. They were participants in a vast interwoven drama. Vikings also engaged in personal devotion, often carrying amulets, charms, or runestones to invoke protection or luck. Thor's hammer, worn as a pendant, was a common talisman, symbolizing strength and defense against chaos. Runes carved into objects, stones, or weapons carried magical intent, encoding prayers, warnings, or blessings. The spiritual and practical coexisted. Faith was both intimate and externalized, shaping behavior, fashion, and ritual. The interplay between fear and reverence was constant. Gods demanded respect, monsters inspired dread, and fate was unyielding. Yet this was not a culture of despair. It was a culture of engagement, where courage, wisdom, and devotion provided means to navigate peril. Life was intense because it was fragile. Every decision resonated within a network of spiritual, social, and cosmic consequence. In this crucible, faith sharpened perception, strengthened courage, and framed the meaning of action and sacrifice. Stories of Ragnarok, the end of the world, loomed over belief, a narrative of destruction and renewal. Even gods were mortal in this vision. Odin, Thor, and Loki would fall, and the cosmos would be reborn. This eschatology instilled humility and resolve. Humans were small in the grand scheme, yet their actions mattered. Their courage, loyalty, and choices contributed to the ongoing drama of existence. Awareness of impermanence did not paralyze but liberated, emphasizing the significance of living honorably and fully. Faith and myth also shaped morality and justice. The sagas often depicted consequences for betrayal, greed, cowardice, and hubris. Deeds had tangible effects, both immediate and spiritual. Moral understanding was encoded in narrative, and ethical behavior reinforced social cohesion. Gods observed, spirits influenced, and humans acted within this matrix, creating a culture where responsibility was both personal and cosmic. The Viking worldview was holistic. War, trade, family, exploration, and faith were intertwined, each domain influencing the others. Courage in battle reflected devotion to gods. Success in trade reflected wisdom and favor. Loyalty to kin reflected moral understanding and spiritual alignment. Life was not fragmented. It was an integrated tapestry of action, belief, and consequence, where honor, faith, and destiny were inseparable. Even today, echoes of this worldview resonate. The fascination with Viking mythology, from sagas to modern media, reflects enduring human curiosity about courage, fate, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. Gods, rituals, and myths were not mere stories. They were tools, frameworks, and companions, guiding actions and providing meaning in a world of uncertainty. In the quiet moments, after the fires have dimmed and the longships rest in their docks, the Viking soul would have contemplated these forces. Life was fleeting, unpredictable, and at times terrifying. But within this uncertainty was purpose: to act with courage, to honor kin, to heed the signs of the gods, and to live in accordance with the threads of fate. Myth was not escape from reality. It was a lens through which to confront it, a narrative scaffolding for understanding existence, struggle, and mortality. The Vikings' faith was ultimately an invitation to engage fully with life, to recognize the beauty and terror of the world, and to meet each day with awareness, courage, and respect. Their stories remind us that humans have always sought to understand their place within the cosmos, to connect the visible and invisible, and to find meaning amid uncertainty. In faith and myth, the Vikings created a mirror of their own humanity, a reflection of courage, curiosity, and the relentless pursuit of understanding within a vast, unpredictable universe. Chapter 7. Traders and Explorers. Picture a bustling harbour at dawn, mist curling over wooden piers, the smell of salt and fish thick in the air. Longships bob gently in the water, their prows carved into serpents or dragons, eyes glinting with the promise of adventure. Merchants call out their wares, from furs and amber to iron tools and exotic spices, while sailors prepare for voyages across icy seas and unknown rivers. This is the world of Viking traders and explorers, a realm where ambition, curiosity, and necessity propelled men and women into the wider world. The sea was both a highway and a challenge, and beyond the horizon lay markets, kingdoms, and territories no Viking had ever seen. Trade was the lifeblood of Viking society, as vital as the sword in war. Towns such as Hedeby, Birka, and Kaupang thrived as centers of commerce, attracting goods and people from across Europe and beyond. Amber from the Baltic, furs from the northern forests, and crafted metalwork traveled to the markets of the Frankish Empire, England, and Byzantium. In return, Vikings acquired silver coins, silk, wine, and luxury items that spoke of distant lands and cultures. Trade was not merely economic, it was a conduit for knowledge, innovation, and cultural exchange. Every transaction carried stories, ideas, and techniques from the wider world into the Viking homelands. The Vikings were not passive merchants. They were skilled negotiators and adaptable intermediaries. Markets demanded shrewdness, charisma, and understanding of foreign customs. A Viking trader might navigate the bustling streets of Constantinople one week and barter with Anglo-Saxon merchants in York the next. Language, diplomacy, and reputation were as crucial as strength or cunning. A merchant's standing could determine access to the most lucrative goods and the respect of powerful allies. Every deal, every contract carried risks, yet it was an opportunity to weave new threads into the expanding tapestry of Viking influence. Exploration, closely tied to trade, pushed Vikings into the unknown. Longships, fast and maneuverable, enabled journeys along coasts and rivers, through treacherous fjords, and across open seas. Navigation relied on experience, memory of landmarks, observation of the sun and stars, and even reading the behavior of birds and ocean currents. These voyages were feats of human ingenuity and courage. They demanded resilience against storms, ice, and fatigue. Each expedition was an act of audacity, a confrontation with nature's raw power, and a test of leadership and endurance. The most celebrated of these exploratory feats was the discovery of lands west of Greenland, later known as Vinland. Saga accounts speak of Leif Erikson and his crew, voyaging across the North Atlantic, encountering strange landscapes, dense forests, and abundant wildlife. Vinland represented opportunity, fertile soil, timber, and a distant place to settle or trade, but also danger from unknown peoples, harsh climate, and isolation. Such voyages blurred the line between survival and adventure, and each return brought stories that expanded the collective imagination of the Viking world. Merchants and explorers often faced a delicate balance between cooperation and conflict. Trade partnerships could shift overnight into violence if agreements were breached or suspicion arose. Pirates and raiders could disrupt routes, But Vikings understood the value of stable networks. Their reputation mattered immensely. A trader known for honesty gained access to markets and alliances, while one marred by treachery risked isolation or attack. Honor, negotiation, and adaptability were as much tools of the explorer as the oar, the sail, or the compass. Constantinople, known to Vikings as Miklagard, stood as a pinnacle of wealth and opportunity. Its markets overflowed with silk, silver, wine, and exotic goods from across the known world. Some Vikings served as mercenaries in the Varangian Guard, elite warriors who protected the emperor while earning fortunes and status. Others traded in the city's bustling bazaars, bringing back treasures that spoke of faraway lands. Here, the Viking gaze encountered Byzantine splendor, religious rituals, and sophisticated governance, experiences that reshaped their understanding of power, culture, and society. The journey to distant lands was never solely commercial. Curiosity, adventure, and the desire for renown drove many to explore rivers and seas that had no known maps. Navigators and skippers became storytellers and knowledge bearers, preserving information about coastlines, currents, winds, and hazards. Each expedition extended the mental map of the Viking world, turning the unknown into the known, and inspiring future generations to venture further. Geography was learned not from books, but from observation, experience, and the relentless pursuit of discovery. Trade and exploration also transformed Viking society at home. Returning merchants brought wealth, but also ideas, technologies, and cultural practices. Silver coins from the Middle East circulated alongside local currency. Foreign textiles influenced clothing, and exotic foods and spices altered diets. These imports were more than luxury. They were evidence of connections and influence, markers of participation in a wider, interconnected world. Trade reshaped social hierarchies and urban life, fostering innovation and expanding horizons beyond the familiar fjords and forests. Life on the longships was rigorous and communal. Crew members shared cramped quarters, endured storms, and navigated unknown waters together. Cooperation and trust were essential. One misstep could endanger the entire expedition. Stories and songs provided comfort and instruction, while observation and experience honed practical skills. The longship itself was a marvel of design, light, flexible, and fast, capable of navigating both open seas and shallow rivers. Its construction reflected deep understanding of wood, hydrodynamics, and engineering, and it became a symbol of Viking mobility and daring. Interactions with distant cultures were complex and multifaceted. Vikings traded, married, fought, and learned from the peoples they encountered. In some regions, they assimilated local practices. In others, they imposed their presence through raids or settlements. This fluidity shaped both Viking identity and the broader medieval world. Knowledge, technology, language, and even cuisine flowed across these interactions, creating networks that were neither purely violent nor purely commercial, but a dynamic combination of both. Exploration was not without peril. Storms could scatter fleets, disease could decimate crews, and encounters with unknown peoples could escalate into conflict. Yet failure was part of the learning process. Each misadventure taught navigation, resource management, and diplomacy. The resilience of Vikings lay in their ability to adapt and endure, to turn setbacks into knowledge, and to view the world as a place of both danger and opportunity. Markets, rivers, and distant harbors became theaters of cultural exchange. Vikings carried not only goods but stories, beliefs, and practices. By trading furs for coins, silks for knowledge, or iron for friendship. They built bridges between worlds. The very act of commerce became a form of diplomacy, a way to map human relations as much as geography. Through trade, exploration, and negotiation, Vikings extended their reach far beyond their homelands, leaving tangible traces across continents and cultures. The legacy of these traders and explorers is visible even today. Archaeological finds in places like Russia, Britain, Ireland, and North America attest to their far-reaching journeys. Artifacts, coins, and remnants of settlements reveal the ingenuity, audacity, and adaptability of Viking society. Beyond material traces, the sagas, poems, and stories of exploration continue to captivate, reflecting a worldview in which courage, curiosity, and engagement with the unknown were essential virtues. To understand the Viking trader or explorer is to grasp a paradox. They were both pragmatists and dreamers. They calculated risk, managed resources, and negotiated alliances. Yet they also sought adventure, renown, and discovery. They respected the gods, read omens, and honored tradition. But they pushed boundaries, challenged norms, and ventured into the unpredictable. Life at the edge of the known world demanded courage, ingenuity, and vision. A combination that defined the Viking spirit. In every harbour, every market, and every fjord, Vikings left traces of their travels. Longships etched into memory, goods carried across borders, and stories passed from one generation to the next all testify to a society that embraced the world beyond its shores. Exploration and trade were more than economic pursuits. They were expressions of identity, curiosity, and ambition. The sea was a teacher, the market a classroom, and every voyage a lesson in resilience and ingenuity. The Vikings' role as traders and explorers reshaped their own culture and the wider medieval world. Through commerce, they connected disparate regions. Through exploration, they expanded the boundaries of imagination and knowledge. Their journeys remind us that human curiosity and enterprise have always transcended borders, that the desire to know, to trade, and to explore is as old as civilization itself. And as the sun sets over distant waters, one can imagine Viking longships gliding across the horizon, carrying not only goods, but the enduring spirit of inquiry and adventure that defined an era. Chapter 8. Clash with the world. Imagine a village at dawn, mist rising from the river, smoke curling from chimneys. Suddenly, the peaceful morning is shattered by the rhythmic beat of drums and the creak of longships slicing through the water. Torches flicker along the shore as warriors descend, shields raised, axes gleaming. This is the Viking world in action, fearless, relentless, and infamous across Europe. The clash with the world was not merely a series of raids. It was a complex interplay of fear, opportunity, and cultural collision. Vikings earned their reputation as raiders through swift, brutal attacks on monasteries, towns, and settlements. Their weapons were extensions of themselves. The axe, light yet deadly. The sword, forged for precision and honor. The spear, a versatile tool for both defense and offense. Shields, often round and reinforced, became mobile barriers, a canvas for intricate designs and symbols of a warrior's identity. Armor was scarce but practical. Leather, chainmail, and sometimes helmets adorned with simple, functional crests. Every piece had purpose. Every swing of an axe or thrust of a spear was honed by experience and necessity. Raids were as psychological as they were physical. The sudden appearance of longships on calm rivers or coastlines struck terror into the hearts of villagers and defenders alike. Fire and destruction were as much messages as tools of conquest. Monasteries, repositories of wealth and knowledge, were particularly targeted. not only for riches, but also for the shock value of desecration. The clanging of metal, the cries of the hunted, and the smell of smoke created a sensory imprint that lingered for generations, cementing the Vikings' fearsome reputation. Yet not all clashes were violent. Some encounters evolved into trade or settlement. In England, France, Ireland, and beyond, Vikings negotiated, assimilated, and intermarried. They established towns, fortified settlements, and trading hubs that became part of the local landscape. This duality, raider and settler, defined Viking interaction with the world. Violence opened doors. Commerce and diplomacy allowed them to walk through those doors and integrate, leaving enduring traces in culture, language, and governance. The Norse concept of honor guided both warfare and diplomacy. A warrior's reputation was built on courage, skill, and the respect of peers. Avoiding combat could be shameful, yet strategic alliances and negotiations required tact and wisdom. These values were encoded in sagas, poetry, and lore, shaping how Vikings approached both the battlefield and the marketplace. A clash was not merely survival. It was an opportunity to assert identity, reputation, and social standing. Raiding required meticulous preparation. Leaders chose targets based on intelligence, opportunity, and timing. Crews trained rigorously, learning to maneuver ships, wield weapons, and coordinate attacks. Logistics mattered. Food, fresh water, and knowledge of terrain could determine the success or failure of an expedition. Even a small village could resist a poorly planned assault, while a well-executed strike could yield wealth, renown, and a powerful psychological advantage over neighboring regions. The human dimension of these clashes is often overlooked. Families, villages, and communities experience fear, loss, and trauma. Yet the Vikings themselves faced danger, injury, and death in nearly every raid. Life on the edge of the known world demanded courage and resilience. Each combatant knew the stakes. Honor and survival were intertwined, and every encounter was a test of skill, judgment, and fortitude. The sagas immortalized not only victories, but also the costs of war, the wounded, the fallen, and the families left to navigate a changed world. Vikings also clashed with larger political entities, from the Carolingian Empire to the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Their attacks were not random. They exploited weaknesses, shifting allegiances, and political fragmentation. Fortified towns and castles presented challenges, but also opportunities for ingenuity. Siege tactics, surprise assaults, and maritime mobility allowed Vikings to punch above their weight, achieving victories disproportionate to their numbers. These interactions shaped European politics, forcing rulers to adapt military strategies, fortifications, and diplomacy in response to Norse incursions. Cultural exchange often accompanied these clashes. Captives could become slaves, laborers, or even integrated members of Viking society. Conversely, Vikings brought foreign knowledge, techniques, and goods back to their homelands. Metallurgy, shipbuilding, and agricultural practices were influenced by exposure to new ideas. Even language absorbed foreign words, while artistic motifs reflected cross-cultural encounters. Violence and exchange existed side by side, creating a complex web of influence, adaptation, and mutual awareness across regions touched by Viking presence. Religion played a subtle yet significant role. Raids often targeted Christian monasteries, not solely for wealth, but as symbolic acts against rivals' gods. The destruction of sacred sites was both practical and psychological, asserting dominance in material and spiritual realms. Conversely, Vikings encountered Christianity in their travels, sometimes adopting elements of faith while maintaining traditional beliefs. These interactions set the stage for gradual cultural transformation, illustrating how conflict and religion were intertwined in shaping medieval Europe. The legacy of these clashes extends far beyond immediate outcomes. Settlements established through raids evolved into towns. Markets and trade routes flourished along former raiding paths. Place names, folklore, and local traditions carry echoes of Norse incursions. The impact on military strategy, fortification design, and political negotiation was profound, influencing European history long after the longships disappeared from rivers and coasts. The Vikings' ability to combine martial prowess with adaptability ensured their imprint endured in tangible and intangible ways. Consider the psychological dimension. Fear and awe were powerful tools. Chroniclers describe the sudden appearance of longships as omens of doom. Villagers fled at rumors of raids, monasteries reinforced defenses, and kings mobilized armies in anticipation. Yet these narratives also revealed respect for Viking skill and courage. Enemies recognized the effectiveness of strategy, seamanship, and combat training, acknowledging the Vikings as formidable opponents. In this way, reputation became both a weapon and a currency, shaping interactions even beyond immediate conflicts. Longships were central to these clashes. Their speed, shallow draft, and versatility allowed rapid assaults and swift retreats. Vikings could strike deep inland via rivers, evade larger armies, and control maritime routes. Shipbuilding knowledge was passed down through generations, combining practicality with artistry. Each vessel was a testament to engineering skill and an extension of Viking identity, carrying men, weapons, and wealth across water and time. The sea became both battlefield and highway, offering mobility that few adversaries could match. Combat itself demanded strategy, discipline, and psychological insight. Warriors organized in shield walls, coordinated attacks, and adapted to the terrain. Surprise, timing, and morale were as decisive as strength or weapon quality. Every skirmish was a study in human behavior under stress, where courage, fear, and leadership determined outcomes. The clash of metal and the cries of men were the music of survival, a visceral reminder of mortality and the stakes of ambition. Yet amidst the violence, Vikings demonstrated pragmatism. Raids were not merely acts of plunder. They were investments in wealth, status, and political leverage. Leaders balanced aggression with negotiation, intimidation with diplomacy. Capturing a fortified town or valuable cargo required more than force. It required observation, planning, and understanding of human behavior. Each raid, each encounter, was a calculated gamble, blending audacity with caution. Settlements resulting from raids created hybrid cultures. Norse architecture, language, and social customs merged with local traditions, producing unique communities across Europe. Dublin, York, and parts of Normandy illustrate how raiding could evolve into lasting influence. The Viking presence altered trade networks, governance, and social structures, leaving enduring marks on European civilization. These outcomes reveal that clashes were not purely destructive. They were transformative, reshaping societies and creating new possibilities for cultural synthesis. The sagas capture the human side of these encounters. Tales of heroism, loss, cunning, and loyalty preserve the emotional reality behind historical events. They tell of families torn apart, warriors who faced impossible odds, and leaders whose decisions determined life or death. These stories reveal the values, fears, and aspirations of Viking society, offering insight into the psychological landscape that underpinned raids and conflicts. Through narrative, the human cost and grandeur of the Viking clash with the world come alive. As European kingdoms adapted to Viking pressure, a new equilibrium emerged. Fortifications were strengthened, alliances formed, and trade relations negotiated. Over time, the raw terror of raids diminished, replaced by structured interaction and coexistence. Yet the echoes of those early clashes remained, in folklore, in place names, and in the cultural memory of societies that had faced the longships and their crews. The world had been confronted by a people both feared and admired, leaving a legacy that was as complex as it was enduring. The Viking clash with the world was a multifaceted phenomenon, encompassing war, commerce, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. It was shaped by human ambition, courage, and adaptability. Raids brought fear and destruction, but also opportunity and integration. Each encounter, each voyage, and each settlement reflected the intricate dance between violence and cooperation, isolation and connectivity, tradition and innovation. The Vikings' ability to navigate this balance ensured their influence across continents and centuries, a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. Through the lens of these clashes, we see a society defined not merely by brutality, but by strategy, honor, and adaptability. The Vikings engaged with the world on their own terms, shaping the course of history and leaving traces that endure in artifacts, place names, and cultural memory. Their story reminds us that human conflict is rarely simple. It is entwined with commerce, negotiation, creativity, and survival. The longships that once brought terror now carry a narrative of courage, enterprise, and enduring fascination. Chapter 9. Twilight of the Vikings. The wind carried a chill that spoke of change. The longships, once symbols of unstoppable freedom, now sailed through waters increasingly watched by fortified towers and organized armies. The era of the Vikings, a time defined by raiding, exploration, and relentless ambition, was entering its twilight. It was not a single battle or a decisive defeat that marked the end, but a gradual transformation of society, belief, and political power. A shift as inevitable as the winter sun sinking behind fjords. Christianity had begun to weave its influence across Scandinavia. Missionaries arrived, bearing crosses and words that spoke of salvation and eternal judgment, alien concepts to people raised on the tales of Odin, Thor, and Freya. Some chieftains resisted, their loyalty to old gods unyielding, but others saw in Christianity a tool of diplomacy, trade, and political unity. Conversion was never purely spiritual. It was strategic, a bridge between the Vikings and the Christian kingdoms they once raided. The spread of faith altered the very fabric of Viking life. Pagan rituals, once performed to ensure fortune in battle or a bountiful harvest, gradually gave way to church ceremonies. Sacred groves were replaced by stone churches, altars by baptismal fonts. Festivities still echoed the old stories, but the cadence of prayer and scripture began to dominate daily life. This was more than cultural change. It was a shift in worldview, a reorientation of what it meant to live, die, and be remembered. Political structures evolved alongside religion. Small, independent chieftains, whose power had thrived on mobility and raids, now found themselves negotiating with emerging kingdoms. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden began consolidating into centralized states. Kings claimed authority over territories once loosely controlled by local leaders. Warfare remained, but its nature changed. Strategic campaigns replaced spontaneous raids. Diplomacy and alliances became as crucial as sword and shield. The old Viking ideal of personal honor began to intertwine with state loyalty and legal authority. Trade grew more sophisticated, connecting Scandinavia to Europe, Byzantium, and even the Middle East. The wealth that raids once brought was now increasingly earned through commerce. Markets in Hedeby, Birka, and Kaupang thrived, drawing merchants from distant lands. Silver, spices, furs, and slaves moved along established routes, linking the Viking world to a broader network of exchange. Prosperity no longer required plunder alone. It demanded negotiation, knowledge of foreign customs, and the ability to navigate the complex web of international trade. Yet the twilight was not peaceful. Conflicts persisted, both internal and external. Rivalries between kings, disputes over succession, and tensions between newly Christianized rulers and traditionalists created fractures. Europe remained wary of Viking power, even as its form changed. Fortresses, garrisons, and naval patrols limited the free movement that had once defined longship raids. Each year, the world became slightly less wild, slightly more constrained, and the Vikings adapted or perished. The human toll of this transition was profound. Warriors who once thrived on the unpredictability of raids faced a future where skill at sea or in combat was insufficient to guarantee status or survival. Families adjusted to settled life, tending fields rather than preparing for plunder. Communities that had once been transient became rooted in soil, in stone buildings, and in legal codes. The ethos of constant movement, risk, and daring gradually softened under the weight of permanence, law, and faith. Culturally, the Norse sagas and poems became vital repositories of memory. They preserved the stories of heroes, gods, and warriors at a time when the old ways were fading. Oral tradition ensured that tales of courage, cunning, and adventure survived even as belief systems and social structures evolved. These sagas were not mere entertainment. They were the threads connecting the Viking past to a new era, a way for people to remember who they were even as the world around them changed. Christianity did not eradicate Norse identity, but it reframed it. Legends of gods and heroes were reinterpreted, sometimes merged with Christian morality. Burial practices shifted from ship graves and ritual sacrifices to consecrated ground and church ceremonies. Symbols of pagan power, the hammer of Thor, the runes carved in stone, persisted, often integrated into Christian iconography, a subtle dialogue between old and new. Scandinavia was becoming a land where faith, politics, and culture were entwined in ways that would define the medieval era. The twilight was also marked by exploration. Even as raids declined, Vikings continued to voyage to distant lands, Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland. These journeys reflected a blend of ambition, curiosity, and necessity. Migration, settlement, and trade became the new frontiers, replacing the destructive raids of earlier generations. The longships still moved, but their purpose shifted from terror to survival, from conquest to connection. The spirit of adventure persisted, even as the ethos of war diminished. Kings and chieftains learned to navigate this evolving world with diplomacy, marriage alliances, and negotiation. The consolidation of power required patience and strategic thinking. Some leaders resisted the change, clinging to the old ways, while others embraced adaptation, blending martial skill with political acumen. This balance between tradition and transformation characterized the final decades of the Viking era, ensuring that the legacy of the Norse endured, even as its forms evolved. Externally, the influence of European kingdoms and the spread of Christianity created pressures that reshaped Viking society. Fortified cities, organized armies, and codified laws constrained free movement. Piracy and raiding were increasingly risky, while trade and diplomacy offered safer rewards. The Vikings who thrived in this new environment were those who could adapt, balancing courage with calculation, loyalty with pragmatism. Survival now required intellect as much as strength, foresight as much as bravery. The economic transformation was equally significant. Communities that once depended on plunder now cultivated fields, managed livestock, and produced crafts for trade. Markets became centers of wealth and influence, attracting merchants from far and wide. Coins replaced barter, agreements replaced theft, and a network of commerce knitted Scandinavia into the wider European economy. The longships carried goods and ideas rather than solely warriors, marking a subtle but profound shift in purpose and identity. Education and literacy began to rise alongside these changes. Christianity brought script, record-keeping, and literacy in Latin, facilitating administration, trade, and legal matters. Knowledge of foreign languages, geography, and navigation expanded horizons beyond traditional Norse lands. These skills complemented the traditional abilities of seamanship and combat, producing a society increasingly capable of negotiating complex social, economic, and political landscapes. Yet, despite transformation, echoes of the old ways persisted. Honor, reputation, and courage remained valued, even in a Christianized and centralized context. Festivals retained elements of ritual and storytelling. Songs and poetry celebrated past glories. Even as the Viking world became more structured, the memory of longships slicing through misty fjords, of raids and heroic battles, lingered in hearts, minds, and sagas. The twilight was not a disappearance, but a metamorphosis, a reshaping of identity rather than its end. By the end of the Viking era, Scandinavia had transformed into kingdoms capable of interacting with the wider medieval world on its own terms. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden emerged as centralized powers, Christian and politically sophisticated. The societies that once sent out raiders now sent traders, diplomats, and settlers. The shadow of the longship remained, but it carried a new purpose, reflecting a world where survival required both cunning and cooperation, bravery and diplomacy. The legacy of this twilight is complex. It illustrates how societies adapt under pressure, blending old traditions with new influences. The Vikings were never merely raiders. They were navigators of change, capable of survival and adaptation. Their transformation from pagan raiders to Christianized kings, merchants, and settlers exemplifies human resilience, ingenuity, and the capacity to integrate with a broader world without losing a sense of identity. In literature, archaeology, and folklore, the Viking twilight resonates. Graves, artifacts, and chronicles preserve the tension between old and new. Place names, ship burials, and saga tales remind us of a world in flux, where courage, faith, and strategy intersected with history's relentless currents. By studying this period, we glimpse the human dimensions of adaptation, the sacrifices and triumphs of those navigating the end of an era, and the enduring imprint of a culture that once reshaped Europe. Ultimately, the twilight of the Vikings was not a catastrophe, but an evolution. It was a time of endings and beginnings, where belief, politics, and society converged to produce a transformed landscape. The longships that had terrorized rivers and coasts now symbolized heritage and ingenuity. The warriors who had roamed and raided were remembered as leaders, traders, and explorers. The sagas immortalized a world at the brink of change, capturing both the glory and the uncertainty of transition. The lesson of the twilight is both sobering and inspiring. Change is inevitable, and survival requires adaptation, courage, and insight. The Vikings' journey from raiders to settlers, from paganism to Christianity, from fragmented chieftains to centralized kingdoms, reminds us that identity is not static and that the end of one era is always the seed of the next. The echoes of this transformation continue to shape our understanding of history, culture, and the human capacity to navigate uncertainty with resilience and vision. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Past. The scent of salt and pine still clings to the memory of the Vikings. Centuries have passed since the longships cut through northern waters, yet their echoes resonate in the landscapes, languages, and legends of modern Europe and beyond. The world they knew has vanished, replaced by nations, cities, and borders. But the imprint of the Norse, the explorers, warriors, and storytellers, remains, woven into our cultural consciousness like threads in a vast tapestry. To trace these echoes is to peer into the enduring human fascination with courage, curiosity, and the untamed spirit of the past. The Viking legacy is as tangible as it is mythic. Archaeology has uncovered treasures that speak to their skill, artistry, and ingenuity. From intricately carved runestones to the remains of longships buried in the frozen earth, each artifact offers a window into lives lived on the edge of the known world. These relics tell stories not only of conquest, but of creation, of communities built, crafts mastered, and voyages undertaken into the unknown. The longships, once instruments of fear, now symbolize human ingenuity, capable of navigating oceans with precision and speed that astonishes even modern engineers. Language carries echoes as well. Place names across the British Isles, Ireland, Normandy, and even parts of Russia hint at Norse settlement and influence. Words and syntax infiltrated local tongues, leaving an imprint that persists in idioms, vocabulary, and regional dialects. Names like York, Dublin, and Reykjavik whisper stories of arrivals, settlements, and interactions that shaped communities for generations. Every utterance of these names is a subtle reminder of the centuries-old dance between invaders and settlers, traders and locals, Norse and native. Stories, of course, preserve the spirit of the Vikings more vividly than stone or language ever could. Sagas, poems, and chronicles carried the exploits of gods and men alike, immortalizing deeds of bravery, cunning, and tragedy. These tales blurred the line between history and legend, offering moral lessons, cultural ideals, and entertainment. They allowed successive generations to gaze upon the world as the Vikings did, through the eyes of warriors, explorers, and storytellers who understood that life was a fragile, fleeting, and precious adventure. Modern fascination with Vikings is a cultural phenomenon. From films and television series to literature, museums, and reenactments, the Norse continue to captivate imaginations worldwide. Their image, helmets, axes, longships, and shields, is often romanticized, yet beneath the myth lies a real story of survival, adaptation, and innovation. The enduring allure stems from a complex mixture of admiration and fear. They were both destroyers and creators, raiders and traders, pagans and settlers. Their world was one of extremes, and extremes always leave a mark on memory. The study of Viking history has expanded, shifting from tales of plunder to nuanced explorations of society, economy, and culture. Scholars examine burial rites, trading networks, and legal codes, revealing a sophisticated civilization capable of balancing war and commerce, exploration and settlement. They were not merely marauders. They were navigators of complex human landscapes, negotiating identity, power, and belief in a world constantly in flux. Each discovery refines our understanding, deepening appreciation for their ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience. Museums and exhibitions around the world celebrate this heritage, Artifacts from Viking Age Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and beyond provide tangible connections to the past. Visitors stand before finely crafted jewelry, weaponry, and tools, imagining the hands that shaped them and the lives they touched. Interactive exhibits allow people to explore longships, simulate navigation, or experience daily life in a Viking settlement. These immersive encounters bridge centuries, reminding us that history is not only to be read, but to be felt, experienced, and imagined. Beyond artifacts and stories, Viking influence persists in modern identity and cultural consciousness. Scandinavia retains a strong sense of connection to this past, reflected in festivals, national pride, and education. Norse mythology informs literature, art, and philosophy, inspiring creativity across centuries. Heroes of saga and legend, Odin, Thor, Freya, and Ragnar, resonate not only as gods or chieftains, but as symbols of courage, wisdom, and the eternal human struggle against fate. The moral complexity of their stories continues to engage minds and hearts. Exploration, the hallmark of the Viking spirit, echoes in modern endeavors. The same curiosity that propelled Norse sailors to Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland lives on in scientific discovery, space exploration, and maritime innovation. The Vikings' intimate understanding of geography, weather, and navigation laid foundations for subsequent generations of explorers. Their courage to venture beyond the known, facing peril with determination and ingenuity, serves as an enduring metaphor for the human drive to expand boundaries and seek understanding. Trade, another pillar of Viking life, also resonates today. Early Norse merchants connected Scandinavia to Europe, Byzantium, and the Middle East, exchanging silver, furs, and ideas. This spirit of commerce and cultural exchange anticipated globalization, demonstrating the power of networks to transform societies. Markets and fairs became centers of not only economic but cultural interaction, where ideas, beliefs, and technologies were shared, adapted, and integrated. In this sense, Vikings were early architects of interconnected worlds, blending ambition with opportunity. The Viking legal and social systems provide further echoes. Assemblies like the Thing, where disputes were resolved and laws debated, reflect a nuanced understanding of governance, consensus, and communal responsibility. These practices influence subsequent legal traditions in Scandinavia and beyond. The balance between local autonomy and collective decision-making underscores a society capable of adapting and enduring, even under pressures of conquest, trade, and faith. These lessons remain relevant, reminding us that law and community are central to societal resilience. Art and craftsmanship, too, carry echoes forward. Norse metalwork, wood carving, and textile design continue to inspire artists and artisans. Patterns of interlace, knotwork, and stylized animals appear in modern jewelry, tattoos, and decorative arts, linking contemporary creativity with ancestral skill. In this way, aesthetic sensibilities bridge centuries, preserving the visual language of a culture that valued beauty, symbolism, and technical mastery. The Viking legacy is also present in popular imagination as symbols of courage, resilience, and adventure. They represent a confrontation with nature's extremes, the unknown, and human mortality. The dramatic landscapes of fjords, icy seas, and remote islands shaped a people attuned to risk, resourcefulness, and endurance. Modern fascination often focuses on these qualities, celebrating the Vikings as icons of perseverance, adaptability, and defiance in the face of uncertainty. Yet it is essential to recognize the full complexity of their past. Vikings were not romanticized heroes alone. Their society involved violence, slavery, and hardship. The same longships that carried explorers to new lands also bore raiders into towns and villages, bringing destruction. Understanding these dimensions provides a balanced appreciation, avoiding idealization while acknowledging courage, innovation, and cultural achievement. The legacy is one of duality, light and shadow intertwined, reflecting the full spectrum of human experience. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal the depth and breadth of Viking influence. Burial sites, settlements, and artifacts provide evidence of daily life, social hierarchy, and international contacts. Items of luxury found far from Scandinavia illustrate trade networks spanning continents. Weapons and armor speak to martial culture and technological skill. The preservation of organic materials, such as textiles and wooden structures, offers insight into clothing, housing, and craftsmanship. Each discovery enriches our understanding, reminding us that the past is dynamic and multifaceted. Even in remote corners of the world, traces of Norse exploration remain. Finland, the site in North America visited by Leif Erikson and others, testifies to extraordinary courage and ambition. These expeditions, though fleeting, reveal the Vikings' ability to reach beyond the familiar, to encounter new peoples, and to navigate uncharted territories. Such ventures illuminate the global dimension of their legacy, highlighting a people whose impact was not confined to Scandinavia or Europe, but extended across oceans and generations. In literature, music, and art, the Viking echo resonates. Modern novels, films, and television series draw inspiration from saga narratives, historical events, and mythic themes. Folk music and contemporary compositions incorporate motifs and instruments reminiscent of Norse culture. Artists reinterpret imagery, weaving past and present into new forms. These creative expressions testify to a continuing dialogue between the Viking past and contemporary imagination, a conversation that spans centuries, cultures, and continents. Education and scholarship perpetuate this fascination. Universities, museums, and research institutions examine Viking history from interdisciplinary perspectives, exploring archaeology, anthropology, linguistics, and cultural studies. Conferences and publications disseminate knowledge globally, ensuring that the lessons of the Viking era inform contemporary understanding. Through these efforts, the echoes of the past are not only preserved, but actively interpreted, shaping how we understand identity, culture, and historical transformation. Finally, the Viking legacy endures in the human imagination as a metaphor for adventure, resilience, and curiosity. Their world was one of extremes: harsh climates, unpredictable seas, and formidable adversaries. The stories they left behind, the artifacts they crafted, and the settlements they established testify to a remarkable capacity for adaptation and innovation. Their influence endures not merely because of historical events, but because they embody qualities that continue to inspire humanity: courage, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of the unknown. In reflecting on the echoes of the Viking past, we recognize a profound continuity. The landscapes, artifacts, myths, and stories they left behind form a bridge across centuries. We see ourselves in their daring voyages, in their struggles for survival, and in their relentless drive to explore, create, and connect. The Vikings may have sailed into history, but their spirit, etched in wood, stone, and story, remains alive, a reminder that human curiosity, courage, and imagination transcend time. The tale of the Vikings does not end with the closing of a chapter in history. It continues in the way we tell stories, preserve artifacts, celebrate courage, and explore the unknown. their world is distant yet familiar, foreign yet intimately connected to our own. By studying their legacy, we glimpse the enduring human capacity for adaptation, exploration, and creation. We are heirs to their ingenuity, witnesses to their courage, and participants in the ongoing conversation between past and present. The echoes of the Vikings remind us that history is alive. It is present in our languages, our art, our myths, and our understanding of the world. It teaches resilience, creativity, and the courage to face uncertainty. By listening to these echoes, we connect not only with the people long gone, but with the enduring human spirit that drives us to explore, imagine, and create. The Viking Age may have passed, but its reverberations continue to shape the world, inviting us to honor, question, and learn from the past. Conclusion, and so, our journey through the Viking world comes to a gentle close. We have sailed the cold northern seas, felt the weight of their swords, witnessed the dance of gods and fate, and traced the paths of traders and explorers. We have seen the echoes of their lives ripple across centuries, leaving traces in our languages, landscapes, and imagination. The Vikings were more than raiders. They were creators, travelers, and storytellers, whose spirit continues to inspire awe and curiosity today. Thank you for joining me on this voyage into the past. If you enjoyed exploring these stories, please support this channel with a like and a subscription, and share in the comments. Sleep well, and let the echoes of history guide your dreams tonight.